In this video, we will show you how to replace your water pump on this Kia Forte Koup. This will be located along the passenger side of your engine. Let's get into it. It's time to drain the radiator coolant. To be able to do that, make your way over to the radiator cover, make sure it's cool to the touch. Assuming it is, you can press down, turn this counterclockwise, and lift it up and away from your face in case it's under pressure. A quick inspection under there to make sure the seal's still in good condition, and we'll set this aside. At this point, we need to make our way safely under the vehicle, so safely raise and support. Now from under the vehicle, if you were to look along the passenger side of the bumper cover, just in front of your engine compartment, you're going to find the lower aspect of the radiator. In this area, you're going to be looking for the petcock. For this, you just want to go ahead and turn that counterclockwise, but be careful, coolant will make its way out of here. You need to make sure you have a collection receptacle under here so you can recycle that fluid properly. Let's reach up in there. Sometimes you have to use pliers to break this free. Other times you can do it by hand. We'll let this drain. With the coolant drained, it's time to locate the water pump. You can see it right down here on the passenger side of the engine, kind of along the backside. Before we start removing the serpentine belt, it's a good idea to loosen each one of the three 10mm headed mounting bolts. What if I come this way? There's one. Try to get that last one down along the bottom there. Once you have all three of those 10mm headed mounting bolts broken free, we can continue on to removing the serpentine belt from the water pump. With those mounting bolts broken free, now it's going to be time to start removing the belt from the passenger side of the engine here. You can see the serpentine belt. The serpentine belt makes its way over some pulleys and under others. Pay attention to the belt routing. Once you've done that, you're going to continue on with a 14mm wrench. For this, I like to use a box end wrench. We'll make our way all the way down to the tensioner here. Once you have your tool on there, we're going to be turning this counterclockwise towards the body of the vehicle or the passenger compartment. While holding pressure here, we'll make our way towards the back of the engine along the side, remove the belt from your water pump pulley. Now we can release pressure from the tensioner. We'll use a pry bar to pull the belt away from the water pump. We do not want any coolant to get on the belt. Back over at the water pump, we're going to continue on removing those three bolts holding the pulley in place. Set that aside for recycling. At this point, we're ready to start dismounting the water pump from the engine. You're going to find that it has 6 mounting bolts. It's kind of hard to see down there, so we'll have a look at the new water pump. This is the angle that you want to have it at, with this pointy end facing up and towards the front of the vehicle. Now, when you're going to remove this, you'll find that you have 6 mounting bolts to remove, but you'll also have to pull it out straight away from the engine, towards the passenger side once everything is dislodged. We'll be using a deep 12mm to remove each of these mounting bolts. The first one, I'm going to loosen it up, but leave it in just a couple threads. There's that one. Just a quick inspection, we'll start it back in like I mentioned. Now for the next 5, we'll just fully remove those, a quick inspection, and set them aside. This one's a little bit harder to gain access to. There's that one. We'll continue around the water pump here. There's that one. Now we're moving along the back side of the water pump. Got one more right here. Move a coolant receptacle underneath the water pump. When we start removing this, there may still be coolant in this area. Now we can make our way down here. We'll take hold of the water pump, try to give it a wiggle. Commonly, you're going to find that it's stuck up against the engine block. If it does not pull away, you want to gently pry the water pump away, as I mentioned. We're going to do this while leaving that mounting bolt in there, just a couple threads. Now that we've had that pulled away from the engine and the coolant is fully drained out, we'll continue on to holding onto that water pump, fully remove the bolt, and remove the water pump from the vehicle. There it is, friend. Let's quickly have a look at the original water pump. There's a couple things we want to pay attention to. First of all, you want to ensure that the gasket is either on the water pump or it's at least fully removed from the engine. We'll be having a closer look at the engine in a second. The way you can tell if your gasket is on here essentially is just use a small pocket screwdriver or a pick and pick along the edges. If it comes off like this, your gasket is installed on the water pump, but you definitely still want to inspect that engine anyway. Aside from that, you want to pay attention to this area right here. There should be 2 of these. They're little studs that protrude out from the back of the water pump, and they're supposed to go into the engine. If you only see one, like what we have here, typically that means that the other one is still in the engine down there. That's okay. It is something that you want to pay attention to, though. We've talked about all that. Now let's start having a look at the engine here. As I mentioned, you want to give it a quick wipe and an inspection. Ensure that you don't see any of the original gaskets still in place on the engine. You can't have any raised areas. Aside from that, I also talked about those studs that are supposed to be on the back of the water pump. You can see this one right down here. Like I said, it's still stuck in the engine. If you wanted to, you could try to pull this out with some pliers. You just want to be extremely careful not to cause any damage to the engine. For me personally, I prefer to just leave it in there. And when we go to replace the water pump, we'll reinstall the new one right in the opposite port over here. As long as this one's still in good condition, it's still usable. Let's have a quick look at the new water pump in comparison to the original. What we're paying attention for is if you still had that stud, as I mentioned before, we still have one in the engine there, so we're going to make sure that we install our new stud in the very same port as where the other one's still located. If both of yours are out of the engine, you want to put one here, and you put one right there. You can tell where they go because the holes are larger than all others. With that in place, typically I like to move along right to my gasket. We're going to slide that right on here. Now while we're holding everything together, we'll take this and start getting it in position on the engine. We're attempting to align the water pump with those studs. We want to make sure the studs are in the water pump and the engine. Before you install any of the mounting bolts, just have a quick peek down in here. Ensure that none of the gasket is hanging out of place. Everything needs to be completely seated perfectly, otherwise you're going to have a coolant leak. Get our next two bolts here. This one goes underneath on the bottom corner. Now that they're all started in, we're going to quickly inspect once again to ensure that the gasket's properly seated. It's extremely important. After that, go ahead and snug them up. There's that one. With each of these snug, I'm going to torque them to 96 inch-pounds. Now we'll just make our way up along the backside. It's a good idea to go around one more time for good measure. Once you've gone around and retorqued each of those to confirm everything's torqued properly, it's always a good idea to go ahead and clean up the mess. Remove as much of the coolant residue from the area before you continue on. You can use some water or parts cleaner. Everything's clean. It's time for the water pump pulley. We'll get this in position, align our mounting bolt holes with the mounting bolt holes that are on the water pump, start in each of the brand new mounting bolts. When bringing this into position, it's a good idea to know exactly where each one of the mounting bolt holes is on the water pump. I'm going to aim the first one straight up and down. Slide that pulley on there, trying to get those bolt holes as close as possible. It's pretty impossible to see exactly what's going on. Best thing you can do is just try to feel it out. There's one. A little spin, move along to the next two. Last one in here. They're all started in, snug them up. While tightening these, you want to try to hold that pulley still so it does not spin on you while you're trying to tighten them. Last one. Second one. Let's get this last one. It's time to start reinstalling the serpentine belt. Make sure you have it in the proper routing so it goes over and under each pulley as it should. Just double check along here. The way I typically like to have this set up is so it's around every one of the lower pulleys, coming across the front as well, and the last place that I'm going to mount the serpentine belt to is on the water pump. Make our way down in here. Now, while holding pressure here, I'm just going to give a quick check. I want to make sure I'm over each one of the pulleys, as I mentioned. That looks good. We'll carefully get our hand out of here and the tool. A second inspection of the belt just to ensure we're properly routed and seated properly. Make your way along the bottom passenger side of the radiator. It's time to close the drain. Just go ahead and reach up there. We'll turn this clockwise until it bottoms out. Make sure it's nice and tight, clean up your mess. Now it's time to fill the cooling system. You can either use a specialty tool or you can use a coolant funnel of some sort. Either way, you need to make sure you burp out all the air from inside the system before you go ahead and drive the vehicle around. Now I have a tool that will do this by creating vacuum in the system. It also helps check for leaks. What we're going to do here is apply negative pressure. I'm going to be watching my gauge. I want to see the needle make its way all the way from the red, through the yellow, and in the green. We want to watch it pause in the green someplace, typically above 25 psi there. That's negative pressure. Once we've completed that, we're going to pause and let it try to hold that negative pressure in the system. If we see the needle start to drop for some reason, typically that means you have a leak someplace. As you can see, my needle's sitting exactly where it needs to be. It hasn't moved. It especially hasn't moved down into the yellow or worse into the red. This is a great sign. That means it's time to start filling the cooling system. Since we're using negative pressure for this, or vacuum, we're going to bring our tube right into the coolant jug here. The coolant needs to be 50-50 mixed. You never want to use concentrate, and you especially never want to use only water. Let's start drawing in the coolant. You'll see it make its way up through this hose, and at the same time, the gauge is going to start dropping. Switch over this jug real quick. Continue on. At this point, there's no more vacuum in the system. We can remove our tool. If you don't have the specialty tool, you need to at least have the funnel. When filling this, what we need to do is bring coolant up inside the funnel area. When you're doing that, coolant will be making its way down into the cooling system. Once you feel as though you've got all the air out of the system, essentially it stops burping out little bits of air, you want to go ahead and start up the vehicle. Let it run for a little while, make sure there's no air in the system, and remove the funnel from the area. Just give this a quick check. Let's get this off of here. Clean up your mess. Set your tool aside. Let's clean up the mess. Reinstall your cap. Okay, friend, we finished the installation of our water pump. At this point, once you've bled out all the air in the system and you've triple checked that belt, you want to go ahead and take your vehicle for a road test. When you get back, double check for leaks. Aside from that, thanks for watching.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.